The following is taken from Chapter 13 of the book Heart of the Forge. A fort? Like a real one? She imagined a fortification made of many stones stacked upon each other, the walls rising up taller than two men. Where is it? She asked. Not far. Come on, we'll be back before dark, I promise. She nodded before they headed off again, the sounds of the feast growing more distant. They headed towards the river before turning to follow its banks back toward the southern Dargard mountain range. Cielo shivered down her spine, seeing those peaks again, and kept her eyes focused on where she was stepping. Soon the sounds of the feast had faded completely, to be replaced with the calls of birds and the whispering of trees as their leaves rubbed together in the soft breeze. I have been working on this for a while. No one else has been here. Turf called back over his shoulder. It's coming up around the bend here. The river flowed slowly beside as they made their way under the branches of ancient trees, dry leaves crunching underfoot until they spotted it through a gap in the tree line up ahead. The river was wider here, a small grassy island rising up in the middle, upon which sat the remains of a small crumbling tower covered in moss, vines snaking their way up its side like veins running under the skin. 3 floors in total, if one was to count the rooftop, with its barely there battlements. I keep a fishing boat over here for crossing. A small wooden raft was hung up from a low branch to keep it out of the water when it was not in use. They lifted it off its hook, placing it in the stream. Gallantly, Turf helped Cielo to hop on with wobbling legs before they pushed off. Turf pulled on an oar, and within a few minutes they were on the banks of the little island. I have been fixing this up ever since I found it. Most people go way downstream if they want to fish. Cielo looked up in amazement. I bet this was where a wizard lived. She shouted excitedly before hunching over and lifting her hands up high, splaying the fingers as she readied herself to cast a spell. Watch your step, little boy, or I'll turn you into a toad. She shrilly cried as she stabbed her fingers at Turf. He dodged to the side before lifting his arm to raise an imaginary shield. My shield can stop any magic, he cried, batting the air left and right. They circled each other as they made whooshing and zinging noises until they tired of the game. There's more inside. This way. They moved around the tower until a small wooden door came into view. The timbers were dark grey with damp, the iron hinges deeply pitted. Turf pulled on the ring-shaped door handle to yank the door open. The stone floor was arranged in a pattern of concentric circles, with a circular stone in the middle. Cielo stepped closer and could make out what appeared to be a crescent moon, faintly carved, worn away with the footfalls of time. A staircase curved up along the side of the opposite wall, made of heavy slabs laid on top of each other, worn in the middle more than the edges. Cielo approached and found the back of the staircase was simply a flat wall, no door leading to a space under the stairs. The ceiling of the ground floor was a good 6 feet above their heads. The thick wooden beams curved upward at the middle point before thickening on the opposite side. Though darkly stained with damp and wood smoke, they had been cleared and carved at some point. The designs were lost in the shadows, faded from the warping rot. She looked around for a moment, searching for something. No torches, I'm afraid, Turf answered, seeming to read her mind. Haven't you ever stayed here overnight? She asked, puzzled. How could someone not? The thrill of having such a private and mysterious sanctuary. Turf looked sheepish for a moment before replying, I've never stayed away from home overnight. He looked away for a moment, slightly embarrassed, before trying to recover. Come, let me show you. He walked over to the bottom of the stairs before starting his ascent. Windows must have been open on the upper floor, as the wall of the staircase was illuminated in a soft light. Hot on his heels, she followed, eager to see what treasures the tower had in store next. She swept her gaze around the floor as it came into view, a large window on the opposite wall where the sun was streaming through. She paused for a moment before she stepped out onto the floor, remembering how damp the beams had looked from the underside. It's okay. I'm up here all the time, Turf reassured her as he stepped out onto the floor, the boards groaning slightly as they took his weight. See? He happily announced, as though the fact he had not immediately fallen to his death as proof of the floor's sturdiness. Reluctantly, she took her first steps, her concerns fading as she noticed what was hanging on the walls. That's not the bow we usually practice with. She pointed to a recurved bow hanging on the wall. It was made from a bright yellow timber, the bow arms curving down before flicking back up. The ends were capped with a shiny metal that looked like it was freshly polished. Stepping closer, she noticed the precision with which the thin leather thong was wrapped around the handle, each strand butting up against the next without appearing to overlap at any point. The bowstring was braided of a fine, smooth brown fiber as thin as a human hair that seemed to change tone ever so slightly with each strand. "How did you get this?" she asked over her shoulder, unable to take her eyes off the bow. "I found it." She turned to face him, expecting him to continue. He appeared uneasy for a moment, wanting to hold this part back before continuing. "There is a small tomb on this island, tucked away on the opposite side from where we came ashore." Cielo's eyes widened in surprise. She crossed a space between them, taking his hand in hers. "Show me."